So listen up, because this story is absolutely bonkers. This dude straight up tries to become a serial killer because of a TV show. Like, not just fantasizes about it, not just writes creepy fan fiction, but actually goes out there and tries to pull it off. And I'm talking about a guy who had a wife, a kid, a normal life in Canada, and he throws it all away because he wants to be like Dexter Morgan from that show on Showtime. Yeah, you heard that right, a fictional character on television, and this man thought, you know what, that's the life for me. The guy's name is Mark Twitchell, and back in 2008, he was 29 years old, living in Edmonton, Alberta. Now, Mark wasn't some basement-dwelling weirdo with no prospects. This dude actually had dreams. Big dreams. He wanted to be a filmmaker, the next big thing in Hollywood. He'd graduated from the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology with a degree in radio and television arts back in 2000. He'd even made this full-length Star Wars fan film called Star Wars Secrets of the Rebellion that got some buzz online. It had a cameo from Jeremy Bulloch, the actual guy who played Boba Fett in the original movies. So Mark had talent, he had connections, he was making moves in the indie film world. But somewhere along the way, Mark discovered the TV series Dexter. And I mean, he really discovered it. We're not talking about casual fandom here. This man became completely, utterly, totally obsessed with Dexter Morgan, the main character who's a forensic blood spatter analyst by day and a vigilante serial killer by night. Mark didn't just watch the show, he studied it like it was a documentary. He created a Facebook profile pretending to be Dexter Morgan. He would post on there about his activities as if he were the character, and people thought he was just being a super fan, role-playing for fun. But nope, Mark was dead serious. He was planning something real. Now here's where Mark completely missed the point of the entire show. In Dexter, the whole premise is that Dexter Morgan only kills other killers and really bad people who've escaped justice. There's this whole code that his adoptive father taught him. Dexter's supposed to be this dark hero, right? Taking out the trash that the justice system can't touch. But Mark Twitchell? He didn't care about any of that. He just wanted the thrill of killing. He wanted to know what it felt like to take a human life. The victims didn't need to be criminals or bad people, they just needed to be available. And that's psychopath behavior right there. So in September of 2008, Mark rents this garage space in South Edmonton, and he tells people he's going to film a short horror movie there. The film's called House of Cards, and it's only supposed to be about 9 minutes long. The plot? A killer lures a man to his garage using a fake online dating profile, then attacks him and murders him. Sound familiar? Yeah, because that's exactly what Mark was planning to do in real life. The movie was basically his blueprint, his test run, his way of setting everything up under the guise of being an aspiring filmmaker. He films his little movie with some friends and local actors, they shoot the scenes, everything looks legit, and when they're done, Mark tells everyone, "Thanks, great job, movie's wrapped." But he keeps the garage, and he starts transforming it into what he called his kill room. He hangs plastic sheeting on the walls, just like Dexter does in the show. He sets up a table. He buys this game processing kit, which is basically a set of knives and tools used for butchering large animals like moose and elk. Hunters use them to field dress their kills. Mark bought one because he was planning to dismember a human body. He also purchased a 45-gallon steel drum, a hockey mask, duct tape, and a stun baton. Oh, and he bought this specific hunting knife that he called his kill knife in his writings. This dude was going full psycho mode. And while he's setting all this up, Mark starts keeping this diary on his laptop. He calls it SK Confessions. SK stands for Serial Killer Confessions. In this document, he writes, and I quote, "This story is based on true events. The names and events were altered slightly to protect the guilty. This is the story of my progression into becoming a serial killer." Right there, first paragraph. He tells you exactly what he's doing, and he details everything. His thoughts, his plans, his obsession with murder. He writes about how killing is an exhilarating new hobby. He describes the preparation, the anticipation, everything. It's absolutely chilling. Now, Mark needs victims, and being the coward that he is, he decides to catfish people. He goes on this dating website called Plenty of Fish, which was super popular back then, and he creates a fake profile pretending to be an attractive woman. He's using fake pictures, fake name, the whole 9 yards. And he starts messaging guys who are looking for dates, looking for companionship, maybe looking for love maybe. And Mark is thinking, perfect, these lonely dudes are gonna be easy targets. The first guy he connects with is a man named Gilles Tetreault. Gilles is a computer company contractor, regular guy, just trying to meet someone, and he matches with this profile of a pretty blonde woman named Sheena. They start chatting and Sheena seems interested. They're hitting it off through messages, and after a bit of back and forth, Sheena suggests they meet up. But here's the weird part. She doesn't give him an address. Instead, she sends him these specific directions on how to find her place. The directions lead to Mark's rented garage in South Edmonton. And Sheena tells him, the garage door will be open for you, just come on in. Now, if you're Gilles Tetreault, you might be thinking this is a little sketchy. Meeting someone for the first time in a garage, no phone number, no proper address, just directions to a back alley garage, that's not normal date behavior. But I guess Gilles really wanted to meet this woman. Maybe he thought she was just being quirky or cautious. So on October 3rd, 2008, he drives out to the location following the directions. He gets there, and sure enough, the garage door is partially open, just like she said. It's dark inside, and Gilles, being the trusting soul that he is, walks right in. And the second he steps inside that garage, boom, someone grabs him from behind. He spins around and comes face to face with this dude wearing a black and gold hockey mask. And Gilles is immediately like, oh no, this is no date, this is a nightmare. The masked man, who's Mark Twitchell, hits Gilles with a stun baton, one of those electric shock weapons, zaps him right there. Gilles is in cane, he's confused, he's terrified. Then Mark pulls out what looks like a gun and points it at Gilles, screaming at him to get down on the ground. Gilles complies because he thinks he's about to get shot. Mark tears off a piece of duct tape and tries to cover Gilles' eyes with it. He's trying to restrain him, get him under control so he can proceed with whatever horrific plan he has in mind. But Gilles Tetreault is not going out like that. Even though he's just been shocked and he's disoriented, his survival instinct kicks in. He's fighting back. He's struggling. And during this violent altercation, Gilles manages to grab the gun out of Mark's hand. And that's when he realizes it's fake. It's a prop. It's light, it's plastic, there's no weight to it. This isn't a real firearm. And suddenly, Gilles isn't as terrified anymore. He knows this guy can't shoot him. So Gilles does what any reasonable person would do in this situation. He throws a punch. Now, Gilles is still weak from the stun baton. His muscles aren't working right. His punch doesn't have much power behind it, but it's enough to create an opening. Gilles breaks away, and he bolts toward the garage door. He stumbles outside, and his legs are barely working because of the electrical shock. He's literally crawling toward the street, trying to get away, trying to find help. And there's this couple walking their dog nearby, and Gilles is yelling at them, "Help! Help me! This guy just tried to kill me!" And then Mark Twitchell comes walking out of the garage, still wearing his ridiculous hockey mask, and he sees the couple standing there, so he tries to play it cool. He's like, "Oh, hey, don't worry about it. We're just messing around, filming a movie scene, just goofing off. Everything is fine." And I guess the couple believes him because they just kind of shrug and walk away. Maybe they thought it really was some kind of prank or film project. But that moment of confusion gives Gilles enough time to drag himself back to his car. His legs are starting to work again, barely, and he manages to get in his vehicle and drive away from that nightmare garage. Now, here's the crazy part. Gilles Tetreault doesn't report this incident to the police. Not that night, not the next day, not for weeks. And there are conflicting reports about why. Some sources say Gilles was embarrassed. He'd been catfished, lured into a trap, nearly murdered, and maybe he felt foolish about the whole thing. Other sources say he was genuinely terrified that if he went to the cops, this masked maniac would find out and come finish the job. Whatever the reason, Gilles kept quiet. And that decision, while understandable from a psychological standpoint, meant that Mark Twitchell was still out there, free to try again. And Mark did write about this failed attempt in his SK Confessions document. He detailed the encounter, how his first victim got away, and how frustrated he was that his plan didn't work. But he wasn't discouraged. Oh no, he was just going to be better prepared next time. He was going to make sure his second victim didn't escape. So Mark goes back to Plenty of Fish, he's got his fake female profile up and running again, and within just a few days he matches with another guy. This time, it's a 38-year-old man named John Altinger. Everyone called him Johnny. Johnny was from White Rock, British Columbia originally, but he was living in Edmonton at the time. He worked in quality control at an oil field equipment manufacturing company. By all accounts, Johnny was a good guy. Quiet, kind, into technology and motorcycles. He lived alone and was active on dating sites because he was looking for companionship. Maybe something serious. Johnny starts chatting with who he thinks is a woman named Jen. And they're hitting it off. The conversation is going well. And pretty soon, Jen suggests they meet up. Just like with Gilles, she sends Johnny directions to a garage instead of giving him an actual address. And Johnny, like many people who use online dating, is a bit cautious. He knows you have to be careful meeting strangers from the internet. So before he goes to meet Jen, he does something smart. He emails one of his closest friends, Dale Smith, and he tells Dale about the date. He says he's meeting this woman he connected with online, and he forwards Dale the directions to the garage, just in case something goes wrong, just in case he doesn't come back. It's the kind of precaution that seems paranoid until it saves your life. Or in Johnny's case, helps solve your murder. On October 10th, 2008, Johnny Altinger gets ready for his date. He's probably a little nervous, a little excited. Maybe he's hoping this could be the start of something good. He drives out to the location following the directions. He gets there and finds the garage with the door partially open, just like he was told. And Johnny walks inside. Now, here's where Mark Twitchell's account and the evidence diverge a bit. According to Johnny's friend Dale Smith, Johnny actually called him from the garage shortly after arriving. Johnny told Dale there was no woman there, just some guy with a prop gun saying he was making a movie. And then, Johnny sent Dale an email with just one line. She's home now. Like the date was back on, like everything was fine. That was at around 7:30 in the evening. Less than an hour later, Dale tried calling Johnny multiple times. No answer. Over the weekend, still no answer. What actually happened in that garage was brutal and premeditated. Mark was waiting for Johnny, and the moment he entered, Mark attacked him. He hit him over the head multiple times with a metal pipe, a copper pipe. The blows knocked Johnny down, probably disoriented him, maybe even knocked him unconscious. And then Mark stabbed him, multiple times. He stabbed him in the abdomen and in the neck. He used that hunting knife he'd bought specifically for this purpose, the one he called his kill knife in his writings. Johnny Altinger died in that garage, murdered by a wannabe serial killer who thought he was living out a TV show. And then Mark Twitchell did what he'd been planning all along. He dismembered the body. He used that game processing kit, those knives and saws designed for butchering animals, and he cut Johnny Altinger into pieces. The SK Confessions document describes this in graphic, disturbing detail. There's even a passage where Mark admits he picked up Johnny's severed head and moved the jaw like a puppet, making it talk in a funny voice, and laughed at the total silliness of it all. That detail was so disturbing that the judge, the prosecution, and the defense all agreed it was too inflammatory to present to the jury during the trial. But it gives you a sense of how detached from reality, how devoid of empathy Mark Twitchell really was. He was playing with his victim's head like it was a toy. After dismembering the body, Mark tried to burn the remains in that 45-gallon steel drum he'd purchased. He went to his parents' backyard, put the drum there, and tried to incinerate Johnny's body parts. But it didn't work. Burning a human body isn't as easy as TV makes it look. The fire didn't get hot enough. The plastic bags he'd wrapped the parts in just melted. So Mark had to come up with Plan B. He took the remains, still in garbage bags, and dumped them into a storm sewer manhole south of 130th Avenue and 87th Street in Edmonton. He just dropped Johnny Altinger's dismembered body parts down into the sewage system like he was disposing of trash. And then, Mark went to cover his tracks. He took Johnny's keys and drove to his apartment. He let himself inside and got on his computer. And this is where Mark tried to be clever. He started sending emails from Johnny's account to Johnny's friends and coworkers. The first email went out on October 13th, 3 days after the murder. It said something like, "I've met an extraordinary woman named Jen who has offered to take me on a nice long tropical vacation. We'll be staying in her winter home in Costa Rica. I won't be back until December 10th, but I'll be checking my email periodically." Mark also changed Johnny's Facebook relationship status from single to in a relationship. And he sent an email to Johnny's workplace, resigning on Johnny's behalf. He forged a resignation letter and sent it from Johnny's account. Everything was designed to make it look like Johnny had spontaneously run off to Costa Rica with some woman he just met and wasn't coming back for months. Now, if Mark thought this plan was going to work, he seriously underestimated Johnny's friends, because they knew Johnny, and this whole Costa Rica story, it didn't add up, not even a little. First off, the emails didn't sound like Johnny. The wording was off, the tone was wrong. Johnny wouldn't just abandon his job and his life on a whim to go to Costa Rica with a woman he barely knew. That wasn't his personality at all. Plus, several of his friends pointed out that Johnny didn't even like hot weather. If he was going on a trip, he'd choose somewhere cold, not a tropical paradise. And the email had no contact information, no phone number where he could be reached, no forwarding address, nothing. That was suspicious as hell. So his friends kept trying to call Johnny. No answer. They called again and again, nothing. Then a group of them decided to go to his apartment. They broke in, and what they found made them even more concerned. Johnny's passport was there. How do you fly to Costa Rica without a passport? You don't. That's how. There was no sign that Johnny had packed for an extended trip. No indication that he'd planned to leave. His motorcycle was there. Everything suggested he'd expected to come home. Something was very, very wrong. Johnny's friends went to the police and reported him missing, and initially the police are like, well, maybe he really did go to Costa Rica somehow. But then one of Johnny's friends remembered something crucial. Johnny had sent him an email right before his date, an email with directions to a garage. The friend had only seen the message because he hadn't checked his email in a while, but now he had it, and he brought it straight to the cops. So now the police have an address. They have a starting point for their investigation. They go to the location, which turns out to be this rented garage in South Edmonton. And who rented that garage? An aspiring filmmaker named Mark Twitchell. The police show up at the garage, and Mark is there. They see that he's driving Johnny's car, this red Mazda 6. And when they ask him about it, Mark gives him this ridiculous story. He claims he met Johnny by chance, and Johnny was about to go to Costa Rica with some rich woman and didn't need his car anymore, so he sold it to Mark for 40 Canadian dollars. 40 bucks. For a car. That's the story Mark went with, because apparently he thought the police were idiots. The cops didn't buy it for a second, but at this point, they didn't have enough evidence to arrest Mark. They needed more, so they started investigating. They searched the garage and they found what looked like blood spatter. Mark told them it was fake blood from his movie, from the House of Cards film he'd shot there. But when the police talked to the actors who'd appeared in that film, the actors said there was no blood spatter in their scenes. None. That blood was real. The police brought in forensic teams. They did luminol tests, which reveal blood that's been cleaned up and isn't visible to the naked eye anymore. And the entire garage lit up like a Christmas tree. There was blood everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, on the table, massive amounts of human blood. They even found a piece of tooth which later matched Johnny Altinger through dental records. Then the police impounded Mark's car, Johnny's stolen Mazda 6, and in the trunk they found Johnny's blood, DNA evidence linking Johnny to Mark's vehicle. That was the smoking done. With that evidence in hand, police got a warrant to search Mark's laptop, and on that laptop they found the SK Confessions document. It had been deleted, but the police forensic analyst recovered it, and when they started reading it, they realized this wasn't fiction. This was a confession. This was Mark Twitchell describing in meticulous detail exactly how he'd planned, attempted, and successfully committed murder.
The document described preparing the kill room with plastic sheeting. It described buying the game processing kit, the hockey mask, the steel drum. It described luring the first victim, the one who got away, and how frustrating that failure was. It described luring the second victim, attacking him with a pipe, stabbing him, dismembering him, trying to burn the body, and dumping the remains in the sewer. It described breaking into the victim's home and sending emails to cover up the murder. Line by line, the details in SK confessions matched exactly with the evidence the police had found.
The document described preparing the kill room with plastic sheeting. It described buying the game processing kit, the hockey mask, the steel drum. It described luring the first victim, the one who got away, and how frustrating that failure was. It described luring the second victim, attacking him with a pipe, stabbing him, dismembering him, trying to burn the body, and dumping the remains in the sewer. It described breaking into the victim's home and sending emails to cover up the murder. Line by line, the details in SK confessions matched exactly with the evidence the police had found. But there was one thing in the document that the police couldn't verify. It mentioned a first victim who escaped. If they could find that person, they could prove that SK Confessions wasn't a fictional screenplay like Mark claimed, but an actual account of real crimes. So the police held a press conference, and they showed a picture of the hockey mask, hoping that the person who got away would see it and come forward. And that's when Gilles Tetreault saw the news. He saw the hockey mask, and everything came flooding back. The attack, the garage, the masked man. He realized that if he'd gone to the police back in early October, Johnny Altinger might still be alive. Mark Twitchell might have been arrested before he could kill anyone. Gilles felt tremendous guilt about that, but he did the right thing. He went to the police and told him his story, and suddenly, the prosecution had a living witness who could testify that everything in SK Confessions was real. On October 31st, 2008, Halloween Day, the police set a trap for Mark Twitchell. They used an undercover officer to pose as a potential investor in Mark's film projects. They lured Mark to a coffee shop with the promise of a meeting, and when Mark showed up, ready to pitch his ideas, he was surrounded by tactical officers and arrested. He was charged with first-degree murder of Johnny Altinger. Mark's trial began in March of 2011. It lasted 3 weeks and attracted massive international media attention. People were fascinated by the idea of a wannabe filmmaker so obsessed with a TV show that he tried to become a real-life serial killer. The trial was a media circus, and the prosecution's case was overwhelming. They presented the SK Confessions document as their most damning piece of evidence. They showed the jury all the items Mark had purchased, the game processing kit, the hockey mask, the steel drum. They presented the forensic evidence from the garage, the blood, the piece of tooth. They showed that Johnny Altinger's blood was in Mark's car. They called Gilles Tetreault to the stand, and Gilles testified about his terrifying ordeal in that same garage just 1 week before Johnny was murdered. The testimony proved that SK Confessions was real, that Mark had attempted this before, and that Johnny's death wasn't an accident, it was a premeditated act of murder. Mark Twitchell took the stand in his own defense, and his story was absolutely absurd. He claimed that everything was just a big publicity stunt for his film. He said that he'd created the kill room and lured men to the garage with the intention of scaring them and then revealing it was all fake, so that when his movie House of Cards came out, these guys would come forward and say, "Hey, this really happened to me," and it would create buzz for the film. He called this concept multi-angle psychosis layering entertainment, or MAPLE for short. Yeah, he came up with an acronym for it and everything. According to Mark's testimony, when Johnny Altinger showed up, Mark tried to explain to him that it was all a hoax, but Johnny got angry. Johnny felt humiliated and mocked, and he attacked Mark. They got into a fight. Mark grabbed the pipe in self-defense and hit Johnny. Then Johnny grabbed the pipe and tried to hit Mark back, so Mark grabbed the hunting knife and stabbed Johnny, also in self-defense. It was all just a tragic accident, Mark claimed. He panicked, didn't call an ambulance because he knew Johnny would die from the stab wound to the heart anyway, and then tried to cover it up because he knew how bad it looked. The jury didn't believe a word of it. Not a single word. Because it was ridiculous. The evidence contradicted every part of Mark's story. The SK Confessions document didn't describe a publicity stunt gone wrong.
It described the deliberate, calculated murder of a man Mark called Jim in the document, but who was clearly Johnny Altinger. The document talked about how killing was exhilarating, how Mark wanted to explore his dark side, how he was progressing into becoming a serial killer. Those aren't the words of someone planning a marketing stunt. Those are the words of a remorseless killer. On April 12, 2011, after only about 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. Mark Twitchell was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. In Canada, that's the maximum sentence you can get. And when the verdict was read, Johnny Altinger's family wept in the courtroom. They'd finally gotten justice, but it didn't bring Johnny back. Mark still faced an attempted murder charge for the attack on Gilles Tetreault, but because he'd already received the maximum sentence, prosecutors decided not to pursue that charge. It wouldn't add any time to his prison sentence. On June 17, 2011, the attempted murder charge was officially stayed, meaning the Crown could technically bring it back within a year, but they never did. There was no point. Mark was already going to spend at least the next 25 years behind bars. After his conviction, Mark tried to appeal. He filed a handwritten notice of appeal from his cell in the Saskatchewan penitentiary. He argued that the media coverage of his case had been so extensive and sensationalized that it was impossible for the jury to remain unbiased, even with the judge's instructions. He blamed the media for his conviction, essentially. He said the coverage made the jury view him as a lifetime liar, and that the whole trial was tainted. But on February 12, 2012, Mark abandoned his appeal. He just dropped it. Maybe his lawyers told him he had no chance, maybe he realized he was never getting out. Whatever the reason, he let it go. Now, throughout all of this, Mark Twitchell maintained that his obsession with Dexter had nothing to do with his crimes. He wrote letters to a journalist named Gilles Tetreault, who was covering the case for the Edmonton Journal. Gilles ended up corresponding with Mark for almost 3 years, and Mark sent him about 30 to 35 different letters, totaling around 350 pages. And in those letters, Mark tried to downplay the Dexter connection. He wrote, "As you're aware, Dexter has almost nothing to do with my case. It has no bearing whatsoever on what actually happened." But that's complete nonsense. Steve Lillibune called that claim ridiculous and said there was a logical disconnect there. Because if you look at the evidence, Dexter is all over this case. Mark had a Facebook profile where he pretended to be Dexter Morgan. He posted on that profile about his real-life activities, and people thought he was just role-playing as the character, but he was actually hinting at what he was really doing. He set up his garage kill room with plastic sheeting, just like Dexter does in the show. He had a table set up for his victims. He had a game processing kit similar to the tools Dexter uses. The parallels are undeniable. And in SK Confessions, Mark even acknowledged the connection. He wrote that while his crimes weren't a, quote, copycat of Dexter's style, end quote, he still wanted to pay homage to the character. That's an admission right there. He was inspired by Dexter. He wanted to emulate Dexter. He wanted to be Dexter. But here's the thing. He completely missed the entire point of the show. Dexter Morgan kills bad people, criminals, murderers. There's a moral code, even if it's a twisted one. Mark Twitchell just wanted to kill anyone for the thrill of it. He was never going to be Dexter. He was just going to be the regular, run-of-the-mill psychopathic killer. Retired FBI profilers who analyzed the case, including Julia Cowley, believe that Mark's primary motive was sexual in nature, or at least sexually gratifying in a psychopathic way. He was luring men who thought they were going on romantic dates. He was preparing the room,
choosing his outfit, selecting his weapon. It was like he was preparing for a date himself. The language he used in SK Confessions to describe his preparations and the murder was seductive and excited. He wrote things like, "I wanted the weapon used for the deed itself to be simple, elegant, and beautiful." That's not how normal people talk about murder. That's the language of someone who's aroused by the act. Julia Cowley said, "I think his primary motive was sexual. It's almost as if Mark Twitchell is also preparing for a date. He talks extensively about preparing the room, what he's going to wear, the weapon that he chooses. He describes it in seductive language." She called it a thrill killing and said Mark likely doesn't think anything is wrong with him. He's self-aware enough to understand he doesn't have empathy or sympathy like other people, but he doesn't see that as a problem. It's just how he is. And in his letters to Steve Lilboon, Mark tried to explain himself. He wrote, "There is no root cause. No school bully or impressionably gory movies or video game violence or Showtime television series to point the finger at. It is what it is, and I am what I am." He's basically saying he was born this way, that nothing made him into a killer, he just is one, which is terrifying, because it means he takes no responsibility for his actions. He doesn't blame his upbringing or his circumstances. He just accepts that he's a killer and doesn't see why that should be anyone else's problem. In June of 2010, as Mark was preparing to testify at his trial, he finally told authorities where Johnny Altinger's body was. He drew a map with handwritten directions leading to a manhole where he dumped the remains. Police followed those directions and recovered some of Johnny's skeletal remains from the sewer. The remains showed evidence of cutting and sawing, confirming the dismemberment described in SK Confessions. It was the closure Johnny's family needed, even if it was heartbreaking. Another disturbing document was found on Mark's laptop that didn't make it into the trial. It was called A Profile of a Psychopath, and investigators believe Mark wrote it about himself. It's a detailed self-analysis of personality and behavior. In it, Mark describes himself as lacking empathy, admitting to cheating regularly on his wife just for the thrill of it, and acknowledging that he doesn't fit the profile of a typical serial killer in some ways. He wrote, "I do not con or prey on my family members or friends. I never hurt animals as a child either." But those are small mercies when you're talking about a guy who murdered and dismembered an innocent man and would have kept killing if you hadn't been caught. Mark had been married twice. His first marriage was in 2001 to an American woman named Megan Costella. They divorced in 2005 due to irreconcilable differences. In January of 2007, he married his second wife, Jess. They had a young daughter together, but that marriage ended after Mark's arrest, and the divorce was finalized in 2010. His wife and daughter lost him not to some tragic accident or illness, but because he chose to become a monster. Interestingly, Mark also had a girlfriend on the side while he was married to Jess. Her name was Renee Waring, and she was an animal trainer from Ohio who was also an aspiring filmmaker. They met online and shared what Renee later described as disturbing conversations. They would talk about hypotheticals like, how would you kill somebody and get away with it? And Mark told her, well, you do it like Dexter because Dexter shows you how to do it all the time. Renee thought she was just having dark, edgy conversations with an interesting guy. She even thought at first that she might be talking to Michael C. Hall, the actor who played Dexter, because Mark had replaced his profile picture with a photo of Hall. But then, during the weekend after Johnny Altinger went missing, Mark went radio silent. He stopped responding to her messages, which was unusual because they'd been in daily contact. Renee got worried, and when the news about Mark's arrest broke, she realized with horror what had happened. The man she'd been confiding in, sharing dark fantasies with, had actually acted on those fantasies. He'd killed someone, and she felt complicit even though she didn't know it was real. Detective Bill Clark, one of the lead investigators on the case, said, "We do believe as investigators that the account written by Mark Twitchell in that SK Confessions is exactly what he did to John Altinger." And he added, "Ultimately, Mark Twitchell closed it on himself by writing all about it. No doubt in my mind, he would have kept on killing." That last part is chilling. If Mark hadn't been caught when he would have kept going. Gilles Tetreault was his first attempt. Johnny Altinger was his first success. There would have been a third victim, and a fourth, and a fifth. Mark Twitchell wasn't satisfied with one kill. He called himself an aspiring serial killer. He was planning to make a career out of it. The SK Confessions document even hinted at future victims. He was documenting his progression into becoming a serial killer, meaning he saw it as an ongoing project, not a one-time thing. In 2013, 5 years after his arrest and 2 years after his conviction, it was reported that Mark had bought a TV for his prison cell. And you know what he was watching? Dexter. He caught up on every episode he'd missed since his arrest.
Because apparently, even after being convicted of murder inspired by that very show, he still wanted to watch it. That's dedication to your fandom, I guess. Or it's just further proof that Mark Twitchell is completely disconnected from reality. Mark's case has been featured on numerous true crime programs over the years. It was on Dateline NBC, where they did an episode called The Smoking Gun. It was on 48 Hours Mystery multiple times. It was on The Fifth Estate, which is a Canadian investigative journalism show. Gilles Tetreault, the man who escaped, appeared on several shows including I Survived on the Biography Channel and Dates from Hell on Investigation Discovery. He even wrote a book about his experience called The One Who Got Away: Escape from the Kill Room.